Ambassador Prabhu Dayal is still with us, and we're also joined by Professor W.P.S. Sidhu, Center for Global Affairs, New York University. Professor Sidhu, if I could ask you, in terms of the direction the ties between India and US are expected to take after that meeting between President Trump and Prime Minister Modi, can it also be gleaned from the kind of people that he's been meeting, that people who've been calling on him? We've had Tulsi Gabbard, who's the intelligence boss in the US now after her confirmation, and we also had the US NSA calling on Prime Minister Modi. Later we'll have Elon Musk as well as Vivek Ramaswamy.
Well, certainly, I think this has been a very good start, as has already been mentioned, for India-US relations. But it also has to be put into a wider context. If you look at the Prime Minister Modi being the fourth leader to visit after the new Trump administration has taken over, the emphasis has really been on Asia, or in the Indo-Pacific and the Middle East. The first leader to arrive was the Japanese Prime Minister, and now we have Prime Minister Modi. So clearly, the Indo-Pacific is very, very important for the Trump administration as something very positive, something that they're looking forward to developing. And in the similar logic, the Middle East is equally important. So you had Prime Minister Netanyahu, but you also had the Jordanian King, Abdullah Khamis, visit as well. But I think putting that into context, it shows that India has become a very crucial partner in many of these conversations. And I'm sure you've already outlined some of the ones that are going to be talked about, including technology, but also, I would argue, global affairs, particularly what's happening in the Middle East, but also in Europe, particularly related to Ukraine and Russia. And there, after President Trump's call yesterday, it is also very clear that India and the United States are aligned on having this conflict come to an end sooner rather than later.
Certainly. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, in terms of how the engagement has been happening, it's not just happening when Prime Minister Modi has reached there with the new Trump administration, but also the PM met Vice President Vance in Paris. The Vice President met him there, and earlier, before that, we had Dr. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, going in for the swearing in, the inauguration of Donald Trump, and he also had a quad ministerial there. So how significant is that?
Well, I think that the bilateral engagement got underway, as you said, right from the start. Because on the very day following President Trump's inauguration, there was the Quad meeting. And in addition, our foreign minister, our external affairs minister, Mr. Jaishankar, was given a very, very important seat at the inauguration function. That underlined that the new administration was placing a lot of importance on the relationship with India. So things got off to a good start. As you said, there has been a very important bilateral meeting between the Vice President and our Prime Minister in Paris. There have been a series of important visits by members of the cabinet here in the United States on Prime Minister Modi. So these underline the fact that the new administration wants to put in a lot of content, that it is placing a lot of importance on the bilateral relationship. Of course, during the talks, there would be an attempt, as always is, to address the key issues. And as I said in my opening intervention, these key issues could include the issue of tariffs, immigration, both illegal and legal immigration, because in regard to the illegal immigrants, there is a lot of anguish in India about the manner of their deportation, because many people in India feel that there was some inhumane treatment meted out to them, that the manner of their deportation could have been better handled. Nonetheless, there is also this issue of legal migration. There are lots of Indian students in the United States, and they are keen to stay on, have an H-1B visa, and that has been the tradition, the practice. And the US tech industry leaders have also come out in favor of the H-1B system. So there could be some discussions, but I think that these problems can be ironed out. The issue of tariffs could prove more complicated because of the fact that the Trump administration has said that it would try to cut down the trade deficit with India. And would this involve imposing higher tariffs on Indian imports? It remains to be seen. But I have a feeling that India would be treated slightly more softly than many of the other countries for the simple reason that India's importance as a global strategic partner stands out. India is not only a partner with the United States in Quad, which was referred to by the previous panelist, Mr. Sidhu, but at the same time, India and the United States have very similar views in regard to the important conflicts which are going on. Our Prime Minister has repeatedly said that he believes that this is not an era of war. And President Trump, from the beginning, said that he would try to bring these wars to a close immediately. And in fact, that is his attempt too. So there is similarity in thinking. And in regard to India's own strategic needs, I think there is growing understanding in the United States that these deserve to be met. India has a very, very dangerous geopolitical environment. We have got China on one side, we've got Pakistan on the other side. We need state-of-the-art weaponry. We have been acquiring these from some countries, including the United States, and we would like to continue to acquire them. But of course, the issue is transfer of technology, because we want that these items should, in course of time, be manufactured in India. So there should be the indigenization process alongside the acquisition of sophisticated weaponry.
Right. Professor Dev, what is your take on these commonalities that India and the US have in terms of not just having a safer world, more secure world with, of course, fairness as far as freedom of navigation, rule of law is concerned, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, but also the settling of conflicts?
No, absolutely. I think you can see the commonality at various levels. I would start with actually the bilateral level, and even if you like at the individual level of the level of the two leaders. You know, they're of the cut of the same cloth in many ways politically, and you can see that kind of convergence starting at the domestic level, in some ways also at the regional level, but also the global overview very much is in many ways a common kind of idea. Now, the interesting thing is that in some ways both of them promote the nation first strategy, and sometimes that can be seen as a little bit of a hurdle. But given their personal chemistry and dynamics, I think you can see that this is one area where the two countries are likely to work together, both at the bilateral level but also at the multilateral level, where, as you rightly pointed out, there is a common understanding on wanting to have a more peaceful world, but also there may be some distinctions and differences, which we've seen, for example, and you talked about open and fair access is very much the case in US-India in the Indo-Pacific, but has not translated to the artificial intelligence area, where, for example, the US and the United Kingdom have not signed on to the pledge in Paris, which India, along with 60 other countries, have signed on to as well. So there are also areas of divergence, and certainly one of them may be on trade and also on immigration. But that is what a normal relationship is about. It's about common areas of convergence. And clearly there's a lot of that, particularly in the geopolitical space, but also some areas of divergence. And that seems to be more in the geo-economic area and dynamics. But just as you pointed out, the fact that, you know, many of the very influential people in and outside the Trump administration or advising the Trump administration are of either Indian origin or are of, very close personally to India is also a very important element and factor which is going to drive the bilateral relationship further.
Yes, the latest example is Paul Kapoor, who's been nominated as the Assistant Secretary of State for South Asian Affairs. Is there some indication in that as well, provided, of course, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, he's confirmed by the Senate?
Is that a question to me?
Yes.
Oh, certainly, these are all matters which could be very consequential. But I entirely agree with Mr. Sidhu. The global geo-economic factor is very, very important. And both countries are taking that into account. The geopolitical factor could also play an important role because on Iran, we could find some problems. We have big investments in the Chabahar port, and we were planning to use that port in such a way that we get access through Iran and Afghanistan to Central Asia. And that would facilitate our exports to that region. And we would be able to bypass Pakistan. But President Trump is taking a very tough position in regard to Iran, and it remains to be seen how he will view the Indian investments in Chabahar and the position which India is taking in that context. So there is some possibility of friction or divergence on that issue. But on the larger geopolitical issue, as also the larger geo-economic issue, there is convergence, and a lot of that has to do with Chinese expansionism, both territorial expansionism and economic expansionism. So I think on balance, there is much that the two countries can work together with, and there is, of course, some possibility of divisive issues, but the art of diplomacy is to be able to manage differences and to find common ground and to push ahead on the common ground areas.
Yes, that's an interesting point you made about Chabahar. Professor Sidhu, what do you make of that proposition? Because if Donald Trump wants lasting peace in the Middle East, Iran really can't be left out of the picture. It can't just be about Palestine. So that's one thing to consider. The other is that the biggest promise perhaps Donald Trump has made is to bring prices down, and gas at the petrol station is a major component of high prices anywhere in any country these days, and he said that he wants to drive them down, drill baby drill and all that, get OPEC plus to produce more oil. So where does all this fit in then? Because India also has huge energy needs where US could come in handy.
Well, certainly, since we're talking about the oil and natural gas, the way that I would sort of talk about that and discuss it is, India faced a lot of challenges because of the conflict which was ongoing within Ukraine and Russia. And if that gets resolved, on the one hand, and on the other hand, the United States also steps up its oil and gas production, then that is going to have a likely impact on the global oil and gas prices, which frankly would be to the benefit of India. Because India is obviously a large importer of oil and gas and is looking for the lowest prices possible. India at the same time has also been very strategic in diversifying its resources. And as Minister Puri said in a recent interview, India is also importing $20 billion worth of natural gas from the United States as well. So I think, India can step up or step down its imports from various countries depending on the geopolitics. And I think that may well play out vis-a-vis Iran as well. And also, let's not forget that in the past, India has been able to convince the United States for the exemption, particularly for Chabahar, and that may well be possible as well. Part of it may, of course, depend on how the Iranian leadership responds to the overtures by President Trump. At the moment, they have not been very, very positive at all. but that might likely change depending on how the contours of the Middle East change as well.
Yes, certainly, and India's been able to convince the U.S. To grant it a CATSA exemption as well, but we're completely out of time in this particular segment of the show to talk about it, so we'll have to leave it for another time. But we will keep our continuous coverage going as far as this key trip of Prime Minister Modi to the U.S. is concerned. My colleague Sakal Bhatt will be joining us very shortly to take this forward. Our viewers, thank you so much for joining us for the moment, Professor Sidhu as well as Ambassador Dayal.